Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today and welcome to my review of The Evil Within 2. A big thanks to Bethesda for providing this review copy before launch. It's really helpful when they do this and I'm hoping they're turning around their review policy now. Anyway, let's get this review started with the story. It all begins with Sebastian Castellanos in a dimly lit bar, but then he is contacted by agents of Mobius. Mobius is a secret organization responsible for STEM, which are the pods you find yourself in the first game. You're probably wondering how he ends up back in STEM and why he dived back into that psychological hellhole. Turns out, there is a new version of STEM designed to become a unified consciousness, aka a hive mind, for the real world. Everyone is connected via chips in their head, so Mobius's ultimate goal is controlling society with the touch of a button. Sounds like a great plan, right? STEM must have a pure core in order to function, and that core happens to be Sebastian's daughter Lily. So in goes Sebastian to the STEM spawn town called Union. Sebastian is actually a character that has a personality this time around, unlike the mute he formerly was in his first rodeo. He is constantly battling his guilt and pain of the past, so seeing how and if he can manage to overcome the weight of this mental battle is a solid premise. Sadly though, the story is littered with predictable narrative traits. We've seen this family style story before. The father feels like a failure, he just wants to have his family back again, man. The world constantly reminds him of his failures, and the game expects you to care because it is a family. It's not bad by any means, but if you've played enough games then you've seen this before. Of course, all is not well in Union as we have loads of unhinged lunatics trying to steal the core for their own desires, because if they have the core, then they own Mobius and in turn the real world. With that control, they can create a society as they see fit. It's almost like nobody learned from the first game that STEM is a bad thing. Regardless, the story is more straightforward in The Evil Within 2. In the first Evil Within, nothing makes sense until about the 8-hour mark, but you're able to make sense of things here and can see a clear end goal right away. It took me 11.5 hours to survive The Evil Within 2's 17 chapters. But some of you don't care about the story in The Evil Within, and I understand why, because it's a survival horror title. So let's get into the gameplay, and this is where the flaws of the title shine through. The Evil Within 2 is quite exotic in design, not only in comparison to its sequel, but also for its genre. Level design alternates between vast hub areas akin to Dishonored and narrow corridor crawling that we're familiar with in survival horror titles. That's if this game is even survival horror. The Evil Within 2 never makes up its mind on what it wants to be. During the hub levels, there's plenty of buildings to enter, ammo and supplies to loot, as well as side quests to undertake, and it's a welcome change of pace. I played on the suggested survival difficulty and was constantly rich with all I needed to take anything on, bosses included. You can save even more ammo by utilizing stealth takedowns, which insta-kill most enemies, and since the AI stops working altogether pretty often, it made for a very easy experience. Considering survival wasn't really an issue for me, that removed any gameplay tension that survival horror offers. Survival horror is supposed to encourage the player to make every single shot count and manage resources wisely. When it was all said and done, The Evil Within 2 felt more like an action-adventure game. I mean, in the first Evil Within, I died dozens of times as I struggled my way through, learned the mechanics of the game and the bosses I took on, but I'd be shocked if I died even close to a dozen times in its sequel. Now, I did mention exploration, and while exploring, you'll find various parts that allow you to craft even more resources. You can do this in the field, but it will double the cost of the amount of resources, or you can go to one of the game's many workbenches. It's here that you upgrade your weapons, from firepower and ammo capacity to reload speed and fire rate. Upgrades felt incremental compared to other survival horror titles, considering most were beefy from the start. For example, a pistol having a base reload speed of 1.86 seconds is nothing for anyone who's played a game in this genre. A lot of what's so rewarding with these types of games is succeeding in managing your inventory while allocating the proper upgrades to your weaponry to tackle the upcoming challenge head on. There's also the skill upgrades yet again under athleticism, health, combat, stealth, and recovery, which you use the green gel that enemies drop. It's roughly the same as the first Evil Within, so nothing really has changed here. And if anything, these upgrades are more important than any of the weapons you're going to be upgrading. You can clearly see The Evil Within 2 is trying to appeal to a way larger fan base. There is hardly a trace of what made the first game, in my opinion, such a gruesome yet enjoyable experience. Yes, it was rough around the edges, but I think it had a lot to it that people are going to find out they're going to be missing in this sequel. Certain areas of the hub are interconnected by an underground series of tunnels feels fittingly called the Marrow. There is a lot of back and forth in these areas towards the later part of the game, and the same could be said for some of the game's side quests too when you're in the more open areas. It never broke my spirit, but it did toe the line of tedious as I went from one end of the level to the other and had to stealth tons of enemies over and over again. And sometimes enemies would respawn, which I do have a problem with in games, but this time they were just randomly appearing and there wasn't much of a narrative reason. They were just there. I played this on the PC with an Intel Core i7 at 3.3 GHz, 32 GB of RAM, and a GeForce GTX 980 Ti. The frame rate was smooth, but I did encounter a smidge of inconveniences. My game crashed twice, and at one point I fell entirely under the game world. I could see all of Union, and I haven't encountered a glitch like this in so long. Fortunately, that was the only time that happened, and since the autosave system is good, it didn't impede my progress. That doesn't excuse it, but I think there would be a much bigger problem if it ruined a big chunk of the game for me. Bosses are also a major part of this type of genre, right? It's a chance to test your tactics and use the environment as well as enemy-specific weaknesses to seize the day. The Evil Within 2 has some excellent concepts for bosses that are genuinely terrifying looking, but they end up in what my good friend Carrick would call a bone-crunching contest. It's merely trading blows as the game almost abuses the luxury of ammunition it supplies throughout instead of coming up with actual mechanics. You have to wonder if this was actually planned. While the journey is shorter than the first entry in the series, at least there is a New Game Plus mode as well as a Classic mode. You can't get all your upgrades in the first playthrough, so there is plenty of reason to go back for a second run if you did enjoy it. And now let's move over to sound. Weapons provide powerful audio feedback as they have tons of kick, whether it's the cracking of a pistol, the roar of a shotgun, or the shrieks of the lost around you, it all sounds superb. Environmental sounds are arguably my favorite aspect of the game. Hearing the soft pitter-patter of footsteps in a hollow hallway has a chance to creep you out as you don't know if an enemy is coming up on you. The gooey, jelly-crushing sounds of liquids is so extra, and you hear it with every step in a puddle of blood that you take, that it's just so good. And finally, the soundtrack does set the tone well throughout most of your journey. There is one track that was used for a lot of the emotional family moments, and they kept using it over, so it did lose its effect, but that's the only blemish I felt was on the sound department side of the game. You could also use your sound to easily detect enemies incoming, which is very helpful in the stealth section parts of the game. And now it's time for my verdict. Overall, I enjoyed The Evil Within 2. It's not an awful game by any means, but I feel it lost a lot of what made the first one special. It's not necessarily a survival horror title, and it can't decide what it wants to be. The story is something we've seen before, but much like the rest of the game, as I said, it's not awful, it's just kind of there. So that means that The Evil Within 2 is a game I'm going to say that you wait for a sale on, even if you're a big fan of the first one like I was. It didn't impress me enough to even recommend this to fans, and I think that speaks volumes when I was sitting down trying to weigh out my options for this verdict. I'd say around the $30 to $35 price point is a good time to pick this game up, or if you have a game that you want to throw on your Christmas list, this would be a good one for it. That'll do it for my review of The Evil Within 2. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know if you have any questions on this game in the comments down below. I'll try my best to get back to you, and I'll catch you in the next video. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, like me on Facebook. Those links are in the description down below, along with my Patreon. Do consider supporting that as it fuels all the content we create here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.